Good morning. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started this morning. We're ready to rock and roll. We bring you greetings from Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Stan Watson, the National Director for Policy and Faith-Based Initiative with the HEAL Collaborative. We're happy to be in Phoenix today to present a very, very good program for you concerning protecting health equity in kidney care, and it's going to be a community conversation. Today we'll feature a gentleman that has been an advocate for kidney care. Mr. AJ is going to come and present today. He's an advocate as well as a patient. We'll have either a panel today to talk about policy and those kinds of things that we have done in the past. We'd like to thank our host, Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church here in Phoenix, in collaboration with HEAL Collaborative and Ardelyx in presenting this program. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started this morning and make sure that we leave on time and we start on time. We'll bring up Elder Richard Yarborough of Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church to bring greetings and do our invocation for us as we move forward. Would you give him a hand as he comes this morning? We'll wake ourselves up.
Thank you, sir. How's everybody this morning? Good, good. Well, certainly I welcome you on behalf of Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church and our pastor, Pastor Terry Mackey, who unfortunately is out of town. But we're grateful for this forum this morning for a much needed subject of helping us to understand how to better take care of our bodies and this chronic kidney disease. Personally, I have a wife who is a kidney transplantee, so this is very near and dear to me. So without further ado, I'm going to give a quick prayer and we can start this program. God our Father, we are grateful for your endless mercy and your grace. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for this day and for this topic. Your word says that we perish for lack of knowledge, and we pray, Heavenly Father, that everyone who comes today to present on this topic will be given a word that will glorify you, that will edify you, that will give us the wisdom that we need to move forward, Heavenly Father, with instruction of how we would do better health-wise in taking care of this temple that you've given us. We just thank you for HEAL Collaborative. We thank you for Ardelyx and all that have made this possible. We bless you, we praise you, and we do this for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Mr. Watson.
All right, thank you, Elder Yarborough. We're going to move right along. We have Ken Sprague is Director of Government Affairs for Ardelyx, and he's also one of our sponsors here this morning. Would y'all give him a hand as he comes this morning?
All right, thank you, sir. Hi, everyone. So Ken Sprague from Ardelyx. We're the company that's fortunate enough to be a sponsor of this fantastic event today. Ardelyx is a growing biopharmaceutical company based in Boston, Massachusetts. Our company was founded on the mission to discover, develop, and deliver innovative medicines to individuals living with chronic diseases characterized by significant unmet medical need. For the last 13 years, we've studied a treatment for kidney failure, and specifically hyperphosphatemia, a condition marked by an individual having high phosphorus levels in their body, which unfortunately leads to profound cardiovascular challenges. We were fortunate and thrilled to receive FDA approval at the end of 2023 for our drug Xphozah. We believe really a game changer from a patient journey perspective. That being said, we are unfortunately now dealing with some access challenges presented to us by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So the discussion right now is actually moving this class of drugs from Medicare Part D into Medicare Part B, a bundled payment system, something that really will profoundly challenge patient access. So we're working very hard to prevent that. Congress has already acted 3 times to prevent this move. And unfortunately, though, if they do not act on our legislation, this will happen as of January 1st, 2025. I think at this point, we're cautiously optimistic, I can say, that Congress will act prior to the end of the year. I think all of you can imagine that that's not always so easy, but we're working hard. And so hopefully we will make that happen. But I would love to thank the sponsors, Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church, thank you for having us, the HEAL Collaborative, and all of you. We really appreciate you being here, your participation, and frankly, all of these efforts would be lost without you. So thank you again. We appreciate everything.
All right, let's give our delegates a hand this morning. Thank you so very much. HEAL is predicated on making sure that we talk about partnerships, equity, diversity in our healthcare community. We not only try to get out in our community, but we have to work with all our community components, the church, our educational institutions, because we have to make sure this information gets out to our community and that we become better coalition builders in what we're doing for our kidney patient journey. With that, we have a kidney patient journey person that's going to come up this morning and bless us with his story, Mr. AJ Coulter. AJ said he was a comedian. I don't know if he was a comedian because he was so serious the other day that we didn't believe that he was a comedian. But he said that he is. He's a kidney recipient who has made his mission to share the love and hope that his transplant has given him with the world. As a kidney comedian, he is an extraordinary individual who has not only overcome the challenge of kidney disease, but has also found the courage and humor to share his incredible journey with all of us. And so we're going to welcome him this morning. He's going to tell us about his journey. We'll do a little bit of Q&A with him and see what his journey has really been like as a kidney transplant recipient and what we can do to help him with our delegates and as well as with HEAL. Give AJ the comedian a hand, a kidney recipient, as he comes this morning.
That was my first joke. Got to plan it out like that. First of all, I just want to give thanks to God because, like, without Him, I wouldn't even be here today. I truly believe God molds us into the person we're supposed to be, whether we want to be or not. And my story is just about survival and, overcoming the odds because we all have the capacity to do so. I remember as a young kid, my uncle, he would take us hunting. And I won't go into too much of the details, but this was the first time I really learned how to survive. Because in life, you always have to hunt down the thing that you need to most in order to survive. And I remember growing up, we grew up so impoverished. Like, the only thing we had to play with was rocks. And I hated playing with rocks. But one day, me, my cousin, and my brother were outside playing with rocks. And my cousin was throwing rocks at a car. And my brother was like, no. So he jumped in his way. And my cousin throws a rock at his head. And so my brother runs inside to go tell my uncle, and my cousin just runs in after him. And he gets up to his dad, and he's like, no, Daddy, I didn't throw that rock at his head. A squirrel dropped an acorn on him. And now my uncle, he just looked at him because he knew he was lying because we ate all the squirrels. My whole life, my twin brother, he always stood up for what he believed in. So he was like my biggest motivator. My life has always been hard. I remember growing up in the hood, and my mom, she always suffered from addiction. And I can remember at 5 years old, the cops kicking down our door, and then they sat me in her lap as they were arresting her, taking her to jail. And this would later make me go stay with my grandma, who was also an abusive alcoholic. Now, the thing about my grandma, she was a gangster, let me tell you. She just did like gangster things. Like, I remember when we couldn't sleep at night, she would give us an adult sleep aid. She would just tell us to go chug a 40 and then send us to bed. Oh yeah. And like, thinking back, I was like pretty upset about this because I was like, at least she could have gave us some beer salt, right? This will like later lead to like years of abusing alcohol, but today I celebrate 7 years being free of addiction. Thank you. I mean, it took a lot to like really get there, but God always has a plan, right? So fast forward to high school. I am 16, I'm homeless, I'm running the streets. It was even like one point where I was sleeping in a drainage gully, right? And I found myself in a situation where I was actually staying with a bipolar schizophrenic. I didn't know it at the time, but I was terrified. But I'll always go to church, and our pastor at the time would turn out to be like my future adopted dad. And it was the greatest gift God ever gave me. And let me tell you, growing up in a white family, it is weird, especially like when you come from a hood situation and you're in this like all white family. It was crazy. My stepdad, he like gave me an allowance one time, and like I didn't have to pay him back. I was like, thank the Lord for reparations. You know, that was in fact the first time in my life that I found out that you could really find true love from a stranger. Years later, because we had agreed upon as long as I stayed in school and played football, I could live with them. And after a period, I actually applied for a hardship because I didn't really get to play my senior year, so I went back. We sent in a lot of letters, and I ended up playing. And at the time, my junior year, my GPA was 1.4, but I ended up graduating and going to Northeastern Oklahoma A&M, and then I would later transfer to Oklahoma State. I actually studied engineering in college, in high school. And I don't really even know how I became a comedian because, like, I'm really bad at English. I kind of cheated in college a little bit because my comp teacher, she was a gamer. She would play PlayStation all the time. And so after school, I would play her in a game of Call of Duty, you know, to get that extra credit. After college, it was like the biggest transition in my life. I really started noticing the signs of kidney disease, but I didn't recognize them until years later. I was actually spilling protein because, you know, in college, you would give plasma because that was like your second job, and they kept telling me, like, hey, like, you're spilling protein, you'll get it checked out, but I never did. And then in 2017, I was sent to the emergency room. And it was crazy. I had like all these heart permutations, and it went on for 24 hours. But I almost lost my life and I didn't know it, but I had like a great support team. It was a Carl's Jr. cheeseburger. Because if I never ate that cheeseburger, I would have never found out that I had kidney disease. And kidney disease, it just kind of changed everything for me. Like, I ended up getting I ended up getting a transplant later in life, but you have to deal with certain things that come with kidney disease. Like, it changed dating for me. Dating was weird. Like this one time, I went on a date, right? And for me, like, I want to know what's on the inside of a person. So I'm talking to this girl. She's like, hey, what's your sign? What do you like to do? I'm looking at her, and I'm like, what's your blood type? She's like, oh my God, you're so weird. I'm like, no, my doctor told me that was the best way to find my match. And you guys, you know, like, I grew up in a white family. So she was like, you act too white anyway. And I was like, don't worry, everything below is B positive. I'm just not like looking for love anymore. I'm just trying to find that next organ donor. I know this can sound toxic, but there's nothing more toxic than being on dialysis. And I have to explain to people, because most people don't know what dialysis is, but you know, you're connected to a machine, and it's supposed to clean out all these fluids out your blood, get you all cleaned up. I don't think it worked on me because I was always running back to a relationship with my ex. I swear, like, I sat in that dialysis chair for 5.5 years, and I had PTSD, post-traumatic sitting disorder. I was scared of chairs for like 6 months afterwards. But do you know how you handle PTSD? You become a stand-up comedian. But being on dialysis was like the hardest part of my life. I remember, it was, oh my gosh, my first time in dialysis was just the craziest thing. I remember walking into this dialysis clinic, and I promise you, to the right of me, there was this 80-year-old guy, and he like literally died there the first time. And to the left of me, there was this guy, and he was in an orange jumpsuit. you could tell he just got out of jail, and he was handcuffed to the dialysis chair. I was like waving my hand and everything. I thought I was about to get the electric chair. And it was crazy because, we got to take all these phosphate binders because they help you regulate your phosphorus, And so they handed me these, like, bowl of pills. And I was like, oh, I probably need to take these with my last meal, Years later, being in dialysis taught me how strong I was. It actually brought me closer to God. And at one point in my life, my lungs had actually collapsed because I was drinking so much. And most people will find that sad, but it just made me a beast at beer pong. I ponged until my lungs were gone, you know what I'm saying? So I'm at the hospital, and my doctor's trying to explain to me why my lungs collapsed. And he was telling me, like, the fluid was building up around my heart and my lungs, and it was basically crushing it due to something called fluid retention. And he was like, it means your body can't handle fluids properly. And I looked at him and I was like, what is this, an intervention? And I walked out. After that, I really started to rethink my life. It was October 2018. It was actually one of the hardest years of my life. My twin brother was always like my guardian and my protector. And I actually woke up to a phone call. Sorry, it's like I get a little choked up. I actually woke up to a phone call, and he was brutally shot and murdered. And it was like so crushing. It was like I'm still dealing with it to this day. But to get that phone call and to experience loss, like I already lost a part of me. I lost my kidney, and to be on dialysis, it was too much. And me and my brother, we had this weird relationship. Like, we was always so competitive. We would fight about everything. But, like, now realizing, like, after he passed away, it's nice to know I can win all the arguments now. And I was, like, at the funeral, and it was hard. Like, I was, like, breaking down, crying, because, like, to sit there and see your brother just laying there motionless, and I just, like, really, like, just broke down. I asked God, I was like, why, God? Why did you take my extra set of kidneys, man? Could have had those. But I stood up because my family told me I should be strong. And I'm a comedian, right? And so I decided to tell jokes at a funeral. And y'all know, like, in every family, you got those one haters that just hate your jokes, right? And that's why I don't recommend telling jokes at a funeral, because there's always one person that's dead silent. All right, I'm done messing with y'all for now. Look, I admit, after that loss, it taught me a lot about my brother, because one thing everybody said, he was like, he always led with a smile. And so, like, now when I'm traveling the nation and I'm talking to people, I always try to smile as much as I can, because it's such a light and it just holds dear to me. And it was definitely a weird year for me. At one point, I found myself in a club, and growing up in a white family and then having a bunch of white friends, and you in an all-black club, I already felt like I was out of place. And the only white girl in the club came up to me, and she said the most ruthless thing to me, and it, like, tore my soul. She said I couldn't dance. Right. And I was like, oh my God, like, I felt like such a weenie, right? And I was like, the only thing that could make that worse if, like, the most gangster dude came up in there and then he threw water on me, and then I would just die because, like, fluid retention. And the craziest thing is like, I posted that joke on social media, and I got, like, thousands of followers. And this was the intro to me becoming a comedian in, like, 2020. But it was actually my sister that was like, hey, you should go do stand-up comedy. And so in 2020, I'm homeless. I'm still on dialysis. I actually take the initiative to move out here to Phoenix. And a couple of months later, March of 21, I get on stage for the first time. And my joke is because a lot of you in the kidney community, you know, we have fistulas, and we have like our 2 aneurysms in my arms, like basically 2 bumps. And I had this friend come to my house, and he's like, "Oh, what's wrong with your arm?" And I was like, "I got the disease." And he was like, "What disease?" And I was like, he's probably looking at my arm like it was the movie Alien, like it was about to pop out. And so this was the joke I was gonna tell on stage for the first time, right? And so I'm in the club, I'm in the comedy club, and I'm nervous. I don't know what's about to happen, but I get on stage and I tell this joke. But sidebar, it was kind of funny because, you know, I wear a lot of sleeves when I'm performing, and I had this little alien up there. So I was like, I opened my sleeve, and then like the alien found out, and it was like, oh, he probably thought it was an alien. And the most beautiful thing happened. People started laughing. But then after that, I ran off stage. I never thought I would do comedy again, but God sent me an angel that day. There was this woman in the crowd. I still don't know who she is to this day, but she was like, you know, you got something here with these kidney jokes. You need to keep going. 4 years later, multiple news interviews, celebrity collaborations, magazine articles, performed over 30 conferences. I got an award that's saying that I am a survivor. It's official. That's how you know you're good at surviving. And now I travel pretty often, about 2 to 3 times a month. But it doesn't mean like because I have a transplant now, that like, you know, I still have to overcome certain fears. And like now, I have this irrational fear of staying in hotels under 4 stars, let me tell you. Because my best friend was like, hey man, why you always stay in these fancy hotels? Why don't you go get you a motel? And so I did. Let me tell you, I'll never do that again. Because I picked like a 1-star, it was like $30, you know? And if, you know how you stay in a 4-star hotel and they have like the river flowing through it and there's like greenery everywhere? Motel had the same thing, except the water was coming from the ice machine. Oh yeah, and the greenery was just like mildew and mold on the side. And I walk in, and the guy doesn't speak any English. He's holding up cue cards, talking about, hello, do you want to check in? What's your blood type? But honestly, like, I wasn't nervous, because my other friend was on the phone. He was like, bro, you need to get out there. They're going to take your kidneys or something. And I wasn't worried about it, because the thing, when you go through so much, it teaches you how to survive anything. I had a plan, because if somebody comes after me, fun fact, I got 3 kidneys, right? I got 1 in the front, 2 in the back. I'll throw them these 2 dead kidneys, sneak off, and I'm like, that's what you get when you mess with the black market. All right, so this NAS story it's dark, and I want you to feel how you want to, hate it, love it, laugh at it. You can hate me if you want to, do whatever you feel like, but it's gonna be deep, but I promise you, like, there's a point that I'm getting to. So you know I grew up country, and when I was 12, we lived out in the middle of nowhere, and I had this dog, and her name was Crystal, and I love Crystal. She was my first dog. She was a little rat terrier with her little cute little fuzzy face. Oh, I love you, baby. And she had cancer. And like, it got so bad that the cancer tumors were growing out of her body, her head, and everything, and it hurt me. And my uncle was like, hey, you need to go put her down. And so I did, because I didn't want to see her in pain anymore. So about 4 weeks ago, I found out that my adopted mom went to the hospital for sepsis. And her sister called me, and they were telling me that, you know, she's dying. And she's dying, and she's not going to make it. And the doctor was saying, like, we need to make measures to go ahead and, like, let her go. But her mom kept holding on. And I told her sister, I was like, look, I know it's a hard thing, but if it was up to me, I would put her down. I think the only problem I would have is, like, I would probably use a pillow, but I wouldn't know what kind of pillow I would use. Like, would I use a throw pillow because it would like perfectly fit her face, or would I would probably use a Tempur-Pedic pillow because like after I'm like smashing her face down in there, I put like a face print right there, and then I could set it on my dresser, and then they would call it remember me phone. I know it's a horrible joke, I know, but the most beautiful thing is my mom. She's a survivor, and she pushed through. She made it through. She's doing better. But the thing about my mom is she's been battling chronic illness all her life for years. And she taught me how to survive, you know? And now, looking back, like, it was like a true motivator for me. And now, the biggest problem right now is like she needs a new liver. It's messing with her head. She got a little bit of brain damage. And because of lack of insurance, improper government funding while we're here today, they just push her aside. But the thing is like, I've been so selfish my whole life. And I thought this was for me. I thought this journey for me. I thought traveling, becoming a comedian, telling the jokes was to help me build. But really, it was to help her because now she's needing a new liver. But guess who's connected to so many foundations? Guess who works with the donor network? Guess who has places in high up on a transplant list? I do. And so like now, I'm gonna fight for her and I'm gonna get her a new liver because I know she will make it because she has the capacity to survive. So, if you guys know anybody that is O positive and wants to donate a liver, please feel free to hit me up.
Thank you, AJ. Let's give him a hand. AJ, we would ask you about your mental capability, but you seem to be fine. We will ask you about your family and your relationships with your friends. What would be your advice for a person just starting on dialysis or starting to know that they have kidney disease?
I would say primarily start building a good network around you. I remember, because this is for my mom, she would sit through my dialysis times with me for 4.5 hours. And I remember the biggest thing is she would like cook for me. I would have like a personal meal and she would like give me a menu and we made it cute. It was like I was like, you know, at a restaurant and she would cook for me. And I remember like those days made it easier. So like always have a great support system. Never lose hope because there's so many medical advances. Do your research. There's many foundations out there. There's always a way to find help. So I would say just do your research, keep your head up, and then make sure you have a good support circle.
Mm-hmm. How'd you share your first journey with your friends? And I have two people that were with us on yesterday, Raymond and Angela. I'm asking them to ask you a question as well. How'd you share your journey to begin with your family and friends? How'd you tell your family first, and how'd you share with your friends that you had chronic kidney disease, and how did they react to the information?
I think my story is a little bit different from others. I actually didn't share a lot because I think within like especially the African American community when it comes to health, like we want to be the strongest people. We want to hold that in. It actually took me years to come out with it and I kind of did the journey on my own. But like once I really started letting loose, I would say just always be vulnerable because I had so much support even from the outside that it just kind of helped me push through. So the reaction was positive, and it actually just kept motivating me to push forward.
Okay. Raymond, I want you to comment as well with AJ. It's a tremendous amount of responsibility for reimbursement for the formularies, for Ardelyx's drug, for just the steadfast information we're going to need for our medicine. Talk to us a little bit about your journey with your reimbursement and just the money it needs for a kidney patient, reimbursement-wise.
Oh, reimbursement-wise, I just have to admit that I was very fortunate because I was covered by the VA. But in the beginning, I wasn't. And to receive a bill that was $13,000 just for a couple of weeks of dialysis was overwhelming. And it was the tenacity of my wife that we need to go to the VA. They need to pay for this, not you. But it was quite all the pressures that go with dialysis, and all of a sudden you got these bills coming in. But there was no reimbursement. I mean, it was on me. And the only question I would have for AJ is, how did your kidneys fail? What caused your kidneys to fail?
Man, I always forget to put that in my story, but it wasn't a cheeseburger, by the way. I never get that out the way. It was actually an autoimmune disease called focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, and it pretty much attacked my glomerular glands, caused my kidneys to crystallize over time. They believe the onset started when I was 16. I didn't notice till I was 27, 28, my kidneys failed. I spent 5.5 years on dialysis, and at 33, got me a new kidney. 35 now.
Excellent. We're here that's great. You give him a hand for that. We're here in the church again because one of Hill's missions and from our dashboard is to provide services and information through an entity like the church to make sure that we get the information to our community, to the congregation, so they can share the news. Yesterday we talked to Angela. Angela told us about her journey, but she also told us about a Christian journey. So as a Christian, what is the responsibility of the church, and what can they do to make sure that we do a better job of getting information to the community and as a support group for a kidney transplant or a kidney recipient?
Thank you. To answer the question you posed earlier about sharing the journey and how everything happened, I go to First New Life, and my pastor allowed me to be a part of his message on Sunday at one point about planting seeds, and he allowed me to share my testimony of being having kidney failure, being on dialysis, and it was a few months after I had been hospitalized and I hadn't been out yet. So it was my first time returning to church, and he also allowed me to speak and share. And in that moment, my testimony made such an impact that a lot of people were changed. I shared about how I made some mistakes with not taking my medication, not changing my diet, and that really impacted a lot of people to the point where they started making changes in their lives. There's a group of women today at my church that every day on our prayer line, they take their medication, their blood pressure medications together. So I saw the difference that it's making, and I'm grateful for that opportunity, and the church played a part in it, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have shared it to that many people, because I'm a private person, and part of what I had to deal with was shame. I was ashamed of what had happened, and I blamed myself. But at the same time, I had to forgive myself so that I could get to a point to share my story to help other people.
All right. We'd have to agree with that, but I'm going to ask the church, since we are actually being hosted by Pilgrim Rest. Ms. Sibley, I have to come to you. What is our responsibility in the church? We wait until it's funeral time to say what a good person this person was. And there are things out in the community that we can share to make sure that we have preventative maintenance, that we can make sure that we take care of the whole person. I think I shared with you earlier, a tithing member can't tithe from the hospital bed. So what is our responsibility from the church to help a person like AJ and Raymond and Angela and get this information out to the community and work with organizations like Heal Collaborative and a pharmaceutical company like Ardelyx that's come down from Boston to bring information to the church? What is our responsibility in the church right now?
Thank you, everyone. Our responsibility is to do the work while it's day. However we can get it out. We're thankful for social media platforms. We're thankful for all of the collaborative work that we do throughout the year, throughout the months with awareness. Pilgrim is a large community church that sits on a hill. And so we try our best to get information out, to provide the resources that are needed. And we just continue to do the work. I mean, you get frustrated sometimes, you get discouraged. but you still have to continue to do the work because we are called to do the work. And so we just continue to just use the resources, ask God to enlarge our territory so that we can continue to be that resource here in the community that can provide the answers, what we need. As we're doing it as a church, we're continuing to just do awareness and just repetitively. That's the key, to continue to repeat it. And then just to hand off the baton. It's a relay race, you know what I'm saying? And I heard a pastor say one time, you know, you have a critical exchange zone. So we just want to keep handing off the baton, running the race, and just continuing to help. I knew Dr. Lori, yesterday. She said something that really was very profound to me. You know, people really don't know or don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, give her a hand for that. Excellent. AJ, you've been wonderful. I thank you for coming today and sharing your journey, your story with us. Would y'all give AJ a hand, please? Thank you so very much. You got one more thing? Close it out?
Yeah, and just for the audience here and audience people out there, I'm not that hard to find. If you want to get a hold of me or find more of my stories, just look up Kidney Disease Comedian. I own that now. Y'all have a great evening or night. Dave.
Thank you, AJ. Awesome. That's awesome. Let me get that for you. Thank you. All right. Yesterday we talked about food deserts and policy and how we had problems in our community because a lot of times they talk about our nutrition and things that we should be doing in our community to make sure that we have a whole healthy person. And one of the things that we talked about was mostly in our community, we have food deserts. We don't have the Sprouts and Publix and Kroger's. We may have Family Dollar and Dollar Tree, and they may not do a good job of providing the resources we need for our community. So we have a nutritionist right here, Martina Rahane Sepulveda. She is the founder of Bilingual Renal Dietitian here in the city, and she has a presentation that will talk about nutrition. We talked about a couple of days ago about the colorful plate. I hope she covers that, and she'll talk a little bit about what we should be doing nutrition-wise to make it work. Give her a hand as she comes this morning, please.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this such important conversation about health equity and kidney disease in minority communities, especially the African American community that we know has been historically underserved. As a Latina, immigrant, Hispanic dietitian, I can sympathize with a lot of the struggles that African Americans face every day on not being heard at doctor offices, not getting the right access to knowledge, medications. And I can sympathize with those barriers as somebody that didn't speak English coming into this country, being brushed off with you're crazy or not getting those translation services because my native language is Spanish. I profoundly empathize with those struggles, and I'm committed to do the work to put in a little bit of my effort as a dietitian into this community so that people out there can be empowered to know what the renal diet is supposed to look like so that they can make those changes and hopefully prevent, for those that are not on dialysis yet, prevent them from getting on that dialysis chair. So I've been a dietitian for 4 years. The past 3 years have been specializing in renal nutrition. I work in an outpatient clinic, and I also have my own private practice where I try to target folks with chronic kidney disease to empower them with the skills and the knowledge needed so that they don't have to end up with end-stage renal disease. I think there's a lot of false information out there on social media. Not to say that there's a lot of really good resources, but as a dietitian, I found it really empowering to be able to bust a lot of myths about nutrition out there so that patients are walking away with evidence-based information, which I'm all about. So today we're going to learn a little bit about some of the primary functions of the kidney, some of the fluid recommendations, diet recommendations, and some of the medications we use to control phosphorus in the dialysis setting. Thank you so much for your time. All right, we're going to start with a little bit of background on the kidney. This is the organ that fails when somebody goes into end-stage renal disease. Is it showing now? Okay, good. Some of these important functions include cleaning of the blood. The kidney acts as a filter to cleanse out any additional fluid and toxins that accumulate in the blood. The kidney is also responsible for making red blood cells. It secretes a hormone called EPO that stimulates red blood cell production in the red bone marrow. Patients that are on dialysis, they cannot make red blood cells. That's why they are always coming off from dialysis saying, I'm exhausted, I'm tired. Why do I feel so tired all the time? Your kidney is not making red blood cells that carries the oxygen that gives you energy. So important to understand that. The kidney is also responsible for activating vitamin D. Vitamin D is a type of vitamin that we get from direct exposure to sunshine, but the body cannot utilize it as we absorb it from the sun. It has to be activated at the kidney for it to be utilized. And the main function of vitamin D is to help with the absorption of calcium. As a lot of us know, calcium is so important for having strong bones. So if we don't have a way to activate that vitamin D, we're not able to absorb calcium and our bones become very brittle. We're more prone to things like fractures. And last but not least, an important function of the kidney is promoting acid-base balance. So the kidney has the ability to reabsorb bicarbonate from urine and excrete hydrogen ions so that our pH is not too acidic or too basic, which can really impact our health. So when somebody gets the diagnosis that they're going to end up end-stage renal disease by the nephrologist, they're faced with the difficult decision of, what am I going to do now? So they are often either a dietitian or social worker or somebody on the care team will explain to them, these are the modality choices that you have as a patient that you can choose, right? Most of the time, the most common one right now in our country is hemodialysis. Going to an in-center hemodialysis place, clinic 3 times a week, roughly for between 3 to 4 hours, depending on size of the patient. Most of end-stage renal disease patients are on hemodialysis. Even though it's the most expensive option, there are a lot of efforts right now at trying to send these patients home so that they can dialyze at home instead. So that's where the peritoneal dialysis comes in. The main difference between in-center hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis is that, as we discussed previously, in in-center hemodialysis, you're getting your blood cleaned out by a filter that's outside of your body connected to a machine. And that filter becomes your kidney. It's draining extra fluid and getting rid of all those extra toxins. And with peritoneal dialysis, we're using a membrane that lines our intestines to do the cleaning. So there's no filter doing that for us. There's no outside of the body filter doing that job for us. It's the membrane in our stomach that's doing the filtering, which is most cost effective, number one. But peritoneal dialysis can be done at home, so that gives a lot of flexibility to patients that, for example, work or have caregiving responsibilities. It really can improve quality of life. Patients that are on peritoneal dialysis often find themselves having more freedom, more flexibility with the food choices. They find themselves not having so much restriction because folks doing PD at home often do it daily. So if they're getting cleaned out daily, then that means that they have more flexibility to eat the things that they enjoy, further enhancing that quality of life that's so important for the dialysis patient. And then the last modality here is home dialysis, which is basically doing the hemodialysis with an outside filter outside of the body, but doing it at home. And there's medical training that a patient needs to receive in order to be able to safely do that at home. Right now, the ESRD population in the United States is mostly, like I said, on in-center hemodialysis, but the goal is to push for more peritoneal dialysis. so that patients can have a better quality of life. This is in the end, I think, a patient decision. They can get to decide after they get all the facts straight, pros and cons, they can make that decision for themselves. But there's, I think, the Trump administration decided we want to push for 80% of patients either get a transplant or go on PD to be able to cut down on costs and increase the quality of life. Now we're going to talk a little bit of fluid and sodium control. I think there's a lot of misinformation out there on what is safe to drink and how much should I be drinking. That's a question I get a lot. When the kidney fails, the kidney is responsible for filtering. It's our filter system. When we are on ESRD, that does not work anymore. So every time we're drinking any kind of fluid, it's basically going to all of our tissues, that extra fluid. It is trying to go wherever it can go. And so the body, I like to think of it as a balloon that starts to inflate. But when you think of a balloon, it doesn't have unlimited capacity to hold water. There's going to be a point in time where a balloon is going to pop, and all the water is going to come rushing out. We're doing the same thing to our body. We're hurting it by taking in unlimited amounts of water. So that's something that's one of the first things I like my patients to understand. We cannot be drinking in excess. How much should I be drinking? What's the right amount? It really varies. It's individualized, but a general rule of thumb, we're looking at about 1 liter or 32 ounces of fluids daily. Some patients that have a little bit of remaining kidney function, anywhere between 0 to 15% once they're on dialysis. Some of my patients do make a little bit of urine, so in those situations, definitely it's recommended to increase that above 1 liter, just slightly. But if there's no urine output, then we want to be very firm about sticking to that 1 liter recommendation to avoid damage to tissues, but most specifically the organ that takes the most damage when we become fluid overloaded is the heart. And fluid overload is the top one reason why patients on dialysis go to the hospital. And that has a very high mortality rate, unfortunately. So yeah, some of the health risks, besides obviously the damage to the heart, we're gonna see a lot of swelling. We're gonna have breathing difficulties, so patients are gonna start feeling like they have a lot of pressure on their chest, and the heart problems that come with that as well. In terms of what should I be drinking? We answered the question of how much, but what should we be drinking? I strongly encourage patients on hemodialysis to try to limit or avoid very high sweetened sugary drinks. So anything that has added sugar to their beverages, for example, sodas, those are very commonly known to have a lot of added sugars on them. Because what we know based on the evidence is that very sweet beverages, very sweet foods increase thirst. And increased thirst is going to increase that likelihood of drinking in excess, which is going to put that pressure on the heart. I also recommend trying to avoid salty beverages. Those are less common, but if you think about their tomato, there's a lot of tomato-based drinks that have a lot of sodium in them. And I also strongly recommend trying to limit or staying away from electrolyte drinks, which are most commonly seen being used by people who do sports. But I've occasionally seen patients who think that they may be dehydrated and they're taking a Powerade or a Gatorade, and I don't recommend that because there's a lot of minerals in that drink that can quickly cause toxicity in that patient's body. So we want to stay away from those. Those are not recommended. And once again, decreasing the amount of sugar that we eat and drink, and also with the sodium, trying to stay away from sodium. Sodium is the same thing as salt. Those two words are interchangeable. Staying away from those two is going to decrease our drive for thirst, which is going to decrease how much we're drinking in a day. The low sodium diet. That's one of the toughest things I think my patients hear from me, that I'm gonna put you on a very low sodium diet. I'm like, what do you mean I have to give up my salt shaker? It's a very difficult change, especially somebody who's used to eating very salty foods, but I love to educate and advocate for my patients, let them know that even though food is gonna taste very differently initially once you're giving up that salt shaker, once you're changing your diet to more less sodium-based, less processed, they're gonna see a shift. Food is not gonna taste the same, but their gustatory sense has an ability, an innate ability to adapt to low sodium foods. So if somebody's used to using the salt shaker at every meal for forever, once they start making those changes and they start slowly, I recommend let's slowly start to decrease how much we're eating in terms of salt, and then our gustatory sense is slowly gonna start getting used to that. And then you're gonna go to a restaurant, you're gonna come back and eat the food that you used to eat previously, you're gonna realize that was very salty. Why? Because our gustatory sense has the ability to adjust to a low threshold of salt in our foods. So do not be discouraged by that change in taste. Instead of salt, what do I recommend? I recommend no salt alternatives. There's a lot of really good products out there. Mrs. Dash, it's basically a blend of different herbs and seasonings that do not include salt. For example, paprika, black pepper, oregano, cumin, all of those really rich. They're very rich in flavor. So you're not really giving up a lot in terms of the flavor profile, but by giving up that salt, you're improving your blood pressure, you're decreasing your thirst. Overall, that's really good for your heart. Yeah, and then not only is the salt shaker a big problem that I see, but it's foods that are naturally occurring in sodium. A lot of times that the patient is not adding any salt to them, but the patients are taking them home and they have salt in them. Some of these examples are gonna be things like canned foods, not all of them, but some canned foods can be very high in sodium. Fast food, processed meats like the deli meats, ham, turkey slices. Cheese is very high in sodium. That's a big one to give up for a lot of my patients. They're like, take everything away but the cheese, please. Frozen dinners. The thing about patients on dialysis is that they're tired. They tell me, I am tired, I don't have energy to cook, so I'm gonna get those frozen meals, and they can be very high in sodium, and that's an issue. So my job is to come in and try to provide individualized options, individualized snacks that the patient like and will eat, so that way they don't have to rely on those packaged foods that do provide a lot of sodium. There's a lot of options, there's a lot of recipes, there's wonderful groups on Facebook, online, that are credible, that give ideas on very low cost, very easy to prepare, that don't require a lot of energy, because that's the first things that patients it comes to their minds when I work with them. Like, it sounds like the renal diet sounds too complicated, it sounds like a lot of work. Well, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be a lot of work. You don't have to stand up in your kitchen for 1 hour and cook this elaborate meal just so that you can be healthy. We can find snacks, we can find foods that are very low effort, that are still healthy and giving you the nutrients that you need. And I think that's where the empowering comes in from my end. We want to focus on the lower sodium foods. The freshest is often healthy for the patients, but it is not always the case. I think a really good example of this would be frozen fruits and vegetables. We often have the misconception that, we have to buy them fresh from the grocery store. If it's not fresh, then it's not good for me, and that's not true at all. Frozen produce at the grocery store, it doesn't come with any added sugar, it doesn't come with any added sodium. It's ripened at the peak maturity level for that produce, so it's a really good option because you're getting something that's like ripe. Like if you want to get frozen strawberries, they're going to be sweet. You're never going to get something that's overripe or underripe when you're buying it frozen, and you can do so many things with that. And the shelf life is a big thing too for my patients. A lot of them are low income, so they're on the low cost too when you're getting them frozen. And a lot of my patients with the food insecurity issue that we discussed before, canned products are not always something that we have to demonize, I think. There's a lot of, that's a bad food. I really don't like using that word personally. There is room for getting fruits and vegetables that come in a canned form. A lot of my patients and clients go to food banks and food banks and food shelves, and they tell me, well, I got all these cans of these different variety of vegetables. Should I just throw them away? Can I eat them? They look like they're very high in salt. Absolutely. Take them home, give them a nice rinse under running water. That's gonna delete most of the sodium in there. And that you can make that part of a healthy meal. You don't have to feel like it's not good for you. And something else I'd like to say, just because you're eating something that you felt was maybe a little bit higher in sodium that you intended to, there's such a thing as having a budget for sodium. The recommendation is about 2,000 milligrams per day. So we don't have to feel like, I cannot eat sodium, I'm on a no sodium diet. That's not true. We're in a limited sodium diet. Our budget is 2,000 milligrams per day. We get to choose how we spend those 2,000 milligrams per day. So there's a lot of power in like that choice. How do we want to spend that? What about the other components of the kidney-friendly diet? In patients that are on dialysis who have ESRD, two main concerns that I see often are potassium and phosphorus toxicity, right? They accumulate to very high levels. And when the kidney doesn't work, there's no way for us to get that out of their system, so it stays there. What are some of the potential consequences of having high potassium and phosphorus? With high phosphorus, it's pulling the calcium from the bone, leading to very brittle, very weak bone that can lead to fractures. Patients with high phosphorus long-term can have cardiovascular effects because that calcium, once it exits the bone, it likes to settle on different parts of our body. It likes to settle specifically on the blood vessels, which can lead to calcification of those blood vessels that blocks the blood flow, therefore the oxygen, and leads to tissue death. The worst case scenario is having a stroke or a heart attack as a direct effect from high phosphorus. High phosphorus is anything higher than 5.5. And as a result of having a high potassium, that one is a little bit trickier because the short-term effects can be fatal. As opposed to having high phosphorus over time, you're not going to see that calcification right away. It takes several months, up to years, to be able to see that effect. Not to say that it's not important and it's not something that we have to take accountability and start working on as soon as possible, but potassium is something that when you see a shift, it can very quickly lead to death through cardiac arrest. The heart starts beating irregularly, and fun fact about potassium, it's one of the main ingredients that is added to the lethal injection to death row inmates when they're going to be put to death through the lethal injection. They add a lot of potassium to make this heart stop. So that's what we're doing. We're giving ourselves poison by eating a lot of these high potassium foods. Potassium is usually found primarily in fruits and vegetables. But there's a lot of supplements out there. We have to be really careful because we have to read the label to be able to know exactly how much we're getting. For phosphorus, we primarily find that in dairy, in processed foods, and in dark sodas, except for root beer. And we also have a budget for those two things. It's not like we can have any potassium or no phosphorus. There's like a select maximum amount that's going to be determined by your dietitian. And then the last thing that's really important with the diet is going to be the protein. I like to really highlight the fact that once we're on dialysis, you may have been told in the past you have to limit your protein because it's hurting your kidney. And that's true when somebody is stage 1 to 5, not on dialysis, of chronic kidney disease. We do have to limit protein, but once we end up in dialysis, it's very important to increase our protein intake. Why? We leak a lot of protein while we're getting dialyzed. We have a lot of losses, so we have to make up for those losses. And it is quite significant, the difference when we're on dialysis versus when we're not on dialysis. And in the sources, dietary sources, there's a lot of really good sources, but plant-based is something that I like to advocate for, plant-based protein. That is, if somebody has a little bit of kidney function left, that tends to be a little bit easy on the kidney as opposed to animal protein, but that doesn't mean that we have to limit animal protein. We want to have a balance of both plant-based and animal proteins in our diet, and that's going to help us avoid hospitalization because patients who have really low albumin, they end up in the hospital. We talked about the benefits of kidney-friendly diet. We want to avoid going to the hospital. We want to have a good heart health, avoid irregular heartbeat. We want to avoid itch. I did not mention the itch, but that's one of the side effects of having high phosphorus as well, itch and sore, which is very, very uncomfortable to experience, and we also want to advocate for that bone strength. General healthy eating tips for dialysis. There's going to be the foods that we want to limit. I like to call those sometimes foods. And then the foods on the right, the foods that we want to enjoy, I like to call those the everyday foods. So sometimes foods are going to be things like prepackaged meats, fast food, those tend to be super heavily processed, dairy products, and high potassium produce. I do want to say something though. All of these recommendations are going to be tailored to the patient. So if somebody is showing high blood potassium, high blood phosphorus, that's when we want to be very proactive about limiting these foods. If they do not have high levels, then we do not limit. And then the foods that we do want to make sure we're enjoying every day are going to be fresh meats, breads and grains, dairy substitutes, and low potassium fruits and vegetables that are going to be very good for heart health. We talked about the consequences of having high phosphorus. There are medications to help lower the serum phosphorus. So those are going to be either the medications that bind phosphorus in the gut or that block, right? The binders are going to be binders such as calcium acetate, Renvela as well, and then Auryxia by Ardelyx, that is the one that actually prevents the absorption of phosphorus in the gut. So they work in different ways, but the goal in all of these phosphorus medication is the same, to decrease that serum phosphorus, to avoid the complications that come with that, such as like heart attack, stroke, and classification of the blood vessels. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. If you have any questions, please feel free to
Thank you
let
so
me know.
very much. Let's give her a hand this morning. Any questions for Martina from the audience? No, wait a minute. Give me a breakfast meal, Martina, before you leave. Give me a breakfast meal for a kidney patient. If you're a dietitian, give me a breakfast plate this morning.
Breakfast plate for a kidney patient. Wonderful. One of the major food groups that I think most Americans don't eat generally are our whole grains, and that's something I try to advocate for a lot personally. A really good, easy, cheap, because that's important, right? Oatmeal. I think we do not implement oatmeal enough. Most Americans do not get the recommended serving of whole grain. It's very cheap. This is what I recommend for the oatmeal. Do not get the packages that come with the sweetener that tell you, oh, maple flavored. Get the big tub. It's going to be more friendly for your pocket. You're going to spend less money per serving. You can customize oatmeal to your liking. You can add your favorite fruits. You can add your favorite. It's really a blank slate. But a lot of my patients like to include a little bit of peanut butter to boost the protein intake of that meal. Almond butter, peanut butter, sunflower butter, and the fruit of choice. A lot of them like to include things like apples, some nuts and seeds for that extra protein. And this kind of breakfast, even though it's going to have some phosphorus, the organic phosphorus we don't absorb 100%. So it's less of a concern. This is a very heart healthy breakfast meal for a patient on dialysis.
Okay, Raymond Scott, I'm an actual dialysis patient. I do home hemodialysis. Do you have patients on the Ardelyx
Exfosa?
binder? Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, a lot of my patients and clients from my private practice are on both phosphorus binders and phosphorus blockers. The blocker is Ardelyx, Exfosa, and then the binders, there's different flavors of them, but they all work the same way. They bind the phosphorus so that it doesn't get absorbed into the bloodstream. Yes, I'm familiar with them.
So I cheat sometimes, of course, and I balance that with taking more binders. With the Ardelyx, do you have to take more, or are you covered with those 2 pills a day?
Oh, I love this question so much. Thank you for asking that. So the way that the binders and the Exfosa, which is a phosphorus blocker, work, the mechanism of action is going to be very different. The way you take Exfosa is that you have to take it twice a day. Usually 30 milligrams is what is recommended by some nephrologists. 30 milligrams, you take 1 pill twice a day, and that gives you coverage for the whole day. It blocks the absorption of phosphorus at the gut.
No matter how much I eat?
There's still going to be a little bit absorbed, but it's going to be a significant difference. Are you currently on Exfosa right now?
No, I'm on Renvela.
You're on Renvela.
So on my heavy phosphorus days, I take more.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, Exfosa is a drug that's been explored by a lot of nephrologists. I would definitely encourage you to have that conversation with your nephrologist to see if you would be a good fit for that. But the coverage that Ardelyx Exfosa provides is that it blocks the absorption. So the binders act a little bit differently. They bind the phosphorus at the gut. So when you're eating a meal, we tell you, take your Renvela at the same time of the meal. If you take it before or after, it's not going to bind the phosphorus, so you're going to see your phosphorus going up. The Exfosa, it blocks the absorption at the gut. So that does not mean that you get to have a free, like, I can eat whatever I want. We still want to recommend caution with the diet, but everybody reacts differently. So just because somebody has a lot more freedom to be able to eat high phosphorus food doesn't mean that you will. It's something definitely to discuss with your medical care team at the dialysis facility.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for a great question, Martina. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So the renal diet, I'm just more of an advocate on the preventive
Yes.
healthcare. And the renal diet, when we begin to get the information, when we begin to get our numbers and see that we're maybe headed in that direction, will the renal diet help the progression of the disease process?
100%.
Wow.
Research shows that medical nutrition therapy introduced when somebody is at the chronic kidney disease stage, no matter what stage, he has the capacity to slow down or completely stop progression into end-stage renal disease. The diet is a big factor that I feel personally that is not advocating enough at doctor's offices. They're not referring to dietitians out there. And that's something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm here to spread the word. We need to tell these patients, you need to see a dietitian. Otherwise, you risk of ending. You are going to be, in fact, it's going to happen. If we don't make changes, lifestyle, diet, we're going to become a dialysis patient. And the diet plays a huge role. It's going to be a little bit different than what I spoke here. The diet looks a little bit different when we're before dialysis to when we're on dialysis. So there's some key differences. Today I spoke about the diet once we're on dialysis. But that's what I do in my private practice. I have a private practice where I target patients who are pre-dialysis so that they don't have to be on a dialysis chair. And I tell them this is what you need to do dietary-wise.
Well, thank you so very much. We will have you back to speak.
Thank you so much for your time.
And I think that was a great question. You had a question, Howard, over there? Just a second. That was great you brought up about the binder, because our delegate is going to present in a few minutes a little bit about that, and we're going to move forward. That's why we're here today.
All right, good morning. Thank you for your presentation. So you talked about you being in private practice. So does that require a physician referral, or can I just go through the, I'm going to tell my age, go through the phone book and look up stuff? No, but.
That is such a good question. That is such a good question. So I personally, as I advocate for minority people, right, like Latinos, African Americans, one of the things I realized early on as I was setting up my private practice is that I must take insurance. There's a lot of financial struggle. There's a lot of people, I realize they're not going to be able to afford private pay. So when you're taking insurance, the only insurance right now that requires a physician referral to be able to receive medical nutrition therapy is Medicare. Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, United Healthcare, insurances that I am personally networked with, and I work with patients with that insurance, they do not require a physician referral. So that's only for Medicare. So if you right now know somebody who has those insurances, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, United Healthcare, and you know they're having either diabetes or hypertension, those are the precursors to end-stage renal disease, please urge them to go see a dietitian today.
Excellent. Any other questions? That was great. Martina, thank you very
Thank
much
you.
again. You're going to be around for a little while as well? Thank you again. We're going to bring up our next speaker, Ms. Tanya Sibley. She's a nurse practitioner and also the Advocacy Medical Officer for Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church. And she's going to present this morning, and she's going to be followed by Ken, and then Howard, and Ms. Sears. Let's give Ms. Sibley a hand as she comes this morning.
Okay, I'm up. I just want to thank all of you for being here. I am going to talk a little bit about self-advocacy in the doctor's office. I have been a nurse for 27 years, mostly I've been a little bit of everywhere. But I spent most of my time in ER trauma. And then I got the clarion call from our former president, Barack Obama, that he needed all hands on deck for primary care. So I became a nurse practitioner, and I have been a nurse practitioner now for 14 years. I am currently practicing in geriatrics. I am a gerontologist, which I love, and dealing with, all of the things that come with, including my parents. So my assignment here today is to empower you and us as the patient to become effective at advocating for yourself and for your loved ones. Number one, I'm going to just get straight to the point, because as African Americans and any minority, we fear the doctor's office. We don't want to go, we don't go. And when we go, we don't get enough time to talk about anything. You feel like a meal, right? Just going through, and you get 15 minutes, and you better have your ducks in a row and know what you're going to say, because before you know it, they're out the door. So my recommendation is to come 15 minutes early, come prepared. While your provider is the healthcare expert, you are the expert of you, and only you know what your concerns are and what your questions are. You need to ask them, and the way to ask them is you jot them down. You stay ready. You get your questions, you write them down, and you get to there and you get you a copy. You hand your provider a copy of your questions so that he can or she can have them when they are away from you. This is a strategy that I know that works, because I have people who leave me with their copy of their questions, and then I can go back and my wheels are turning, and I can better research and ask the questions, answer the questions, and call back and let them know that I've researched or followed up on. So jotting down your questions is very important, and having them ready, having 2 lists, one for yourself and one for your provider. Prioritize your concerns, because like I said, they're going to be in and out, right? So put the first question first that's most important to you, because before you know it, time is going to be over and you want to have had that question addressed. Bring someone with you, especially if you're nervous or English is not your first language. Bring someone who speaks fluent English, or bring someone that, can take notes with you and for you. Take control of the appointment. You're the patient. You're the captain. We're just on the team, but you're the captain of the team. So take control of that appointment. Start asking the questions. Have the doctor's list of questions that you want. Be sure you understand the answers that they're giving. And if you don't understand the answers, you tell them you don't understand and that you need more time. That's what I mean by take control of the appointment. And be honest. Be honest. I don't understand. I don't have the understanding. Can you explain that to me on layman's terms? Can you come down to my level? You know, break it down. And that's the thing about nurse practitioners versus an MD. We will break it down. We will set a minute more. So you'll get 16 minutes instead of 15. But that's the things that we can do to advocate, to self-advocate. We can help you understand, but you have to take the initiative. Getting to the appointment 15 minutes early, having the questions written down. And if you're not feeling better at the end of that appointment, if your questions are not answered, then make another appointment. And I know it's time consuming, but it's necessary. You may not get to address all 15 things on your laundry list at that appointment, and you need that understanding that you may need to make 3 appointments before you get through with the list of things that you want. Be kind, because you can't have the expectation of all of these things, because you didn't get in this situation overnight and you're not going to get out of it overnight. So be expectant that you will have to make more than one appointment to address those situations. This is your health. You're the captain. We're on your team. And if you go in with that attitude, you'll start researching more. You'll start collaborating with others. You're the captain. So let's just come together as a team and get it done. Without the ability to self-advocate, you go along, you get along, and get more and more mixed up internally. We have the resources. We just have to know how to utilize them and use them. I mean, you belong to a church, you belong to communities, you belong to gyms, go to the barbershop, the beauty shop, you're in all types of arenas. And I know all information ain't good information, but you can begin the conversations that are needed to help one another. So I'm just saying that as a provider, these are the things that help me on an appointment. If you come 15 minutes early, if you have a list of things that you're concerned about, if you have them prioritized, because I may run out of time, and then I'm going to ask you, and most nurse practitioners will ask you, are you okay? Is it all? Do I need to explain something else? Let them know. Summarize what that visit was about. And how do we follow up? And the one thing with kidney failure, most providers, when they look at the kidney function, and they have separated and using that archaic formula, separating our function, African Americans, from non-African Americans, which is a hoax. But if you don't ask for your labs and you don't share your labs with other people, we're so closed off, so secretive. And that's the thing that we need to get rid of. Because kidney function, what they're looking at as African American, we're already in renal failure, but they're telling us we're okay. We're not okay. Something as simple as knowing your numbers and sharing your numbers, your creatinine, your GFR, your BUN, and something as simple as a urine, seeing if I'm spilling protein. Something that simple will give you the alert and have you on the preventive care and the early detection care. That's where we want to be. And so I am committed. I spoke with my elder yesterday because I was so upset about the outcome, right? Everybody. But we're on social media. We'll reach an audience of far more than these chairs. So I'm so happy and so glad that you decided to come. I'm so glad and happy about what you came to present, even the patients receiving dialysis. But we got to continue to do the work.
That's right.
That falls in our lap, the work. And so I'm committed to teach the dietitian, because she said to me that that renal diet is part of preventive. It's part of just simply something is eating. What am I eating that can preserve my kidneys, preserve my heart? So I'm just saying, advocate for yourself. Urine protein is the first sign of kidney failure. Spilling protein in your urine don't cost nothing to get that test. Is the first sign. And then she can come back and be referred to a dietitian. We know that now. You can advocate for yourself. I want to see a dietitian. I want to see a dietitian. I want to see a specialist. And if your provider is not giving you what it is that you're asking for, you need another provider. You
right.
need another provider. It's a provider-patient relationship. And sometimes it doesn't fit, and it's okay. We have a plethora of providers.
Mm-hmm.
So number one, we need a dietitian. I am convinced of that now after hearing this presentation, that a renal diet for someone who is spilling protein in their urine can prolong and keep it from happening, period. So I am convinced that we need to advocate for ourselves. Ask for that dietitian, because that dietitian is going to help us in every disease process. I don't care if it's my heart, my kidneys, diabetes, hypertension. So I want us to be good advocates. Be good advocates of what we are responsible for over our own bodies, our vessels. He gave to us, and we only get one. We only get one. I thank you for allowing me to speak to you on self-care and self-advocacy.
Excellent. Give her a hand this morning. You said something very profound. You said if my provider is not providing what I need or giving me the information that I don't need, then I need to find another provider. Why do you say that? If he's not providing or she's not providing what I need as a physician, I need to find another physician.
Because time is of the essence. We only get a little time. Time is clicking. We get about 86,400 seconds a day. And if I spend a lot of time going back and forth with a provider about what it is that I need, I'm wasting time and I'm going further into the disease process. When I can get another provider and be a better fit and we can work together and, that provider may listen. And if you begin to ask the questions and you begin to halt this busy person who's running in and out of a room and you begin to let them know, no, I just need to know, they'll usually turn around. I understand as a provider I'm busy, but I have learned an acronym for busy, and that's buried under Satan's yoke, and I can't help nobody.
Right.
Nobody. Busy. So I say, ask for another provider. It doesn't have to be begrudging. It doesn't have to be that. This is your health. You're the captain.
That's right.
And it may just not be a good fit.
Excellent. Thank you again. Give her another hand. Thank you so much, Ms. Sibley. and I know you're going to be here with us at the end of the day. Ken, you ready? Ken Sprague is the Director of Government Affairs for our delegates. He's going to have a small presentation. After that, we're going to have our presentation from our policymaker and also from our advocacy for our organizations in the community to be a part of what we're doing here today. Ken?
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Stan. I may do this from down here just so I can refer to the slides. Just pulling up, but you know, I introduced myself earlier, Ken Sprague from Ardelyx. So that was a wonderful presentation from Tanya. Thank you so much. She talked about self-advocacy. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk about legislative advocacy and what that means. Yep. Oh, and what that means for the community, right? And what that means for this disease state. So, perfect. Yeah, sounds good. Thanks for all your running around. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, let's go back one slide here. Yep. Okay. There we go. Okay, so just a little bit of background. I'm sure most of you know this, but so we kind of have the three main areas here, right? So obviously chronic kidney disease, that's the overarching disease state, right? About 37 million Americans suffer from some form of chronic kidney disease. You know, again, and this is why we're here today, disproportionately impacts those communities of color, absolutely. You know, treatment for chronic kidney disease is really focused on managing the disease, right? And salvaging kidney function to the extent possible. Unfortunately, a lot of times we get to end-stage renal disease or kidney failure, right? And, you know, we've heard some stories today, which we really appreciate, but, you know, this is basically chronic kidney disease has progressed to the point of loss of kidney function, right? It's over 800,000 patients in the U.S. with end-stage renal disease or kidney failure. You know, we heard from AJ earlier. He was fortunate to receive a transplant that is, you know, ultimately the best option. There's currently 100,000 patients on the wait list for a kidney transplant. Dialysis, because of that, is, you know, the most used treatment option. So what is hyperphosphatemia? So we heard a little bit about it, but, and thank you so much for sharing more information on that. But it's elevated serum phosphate levels in the blood, right, due to loss of kidney function. So it's actually pretty staggering the number of people with end-stage renal disease that have this. It's almost 80% of the end-stage renal disease population that has hyperphosphatemia. So again, we heard about this earlier, but you know, the course of action, the treatment for this is either a phosphate binder, which do work, absolutely, or the drug that we've created, Xphozah, which is actually a phosphate blocker. So I think from our perspective and from our legislative advocacy perspective that I'm about to talk about, we certainly are not suggesting that one drug is better than the other. There are reasons for all of these drugs, right? And they're all great, and everybody should have access to the, you know, the complete gambit of these drugs. So a little bit about Medicare coverage for ESRD. I think all of you are probably familiar with the fact that Medicare does cover anyone in the U.S., regardless of age or income, who has end-stage renal disease. This began in 1972 through the Social Security amendments of 1972, so Congress understanding this huge cost burden for patients, the fact that there was this disproportionate impact on communities of color, and generally the unmet medical need, realized they had to step in and do something. And so that was the creation of this Medicare coverage, or this bundled payment system, or Medicare coverage. And then ultimately in 2011, in an effort to try and save money with respect to Medicare coverage in end-stage renal disease patients, they created a bundled payment system in Part B, as in boy. And so this was really meant to capture most of the costs and services associated with dialysis itself, right? But for drugs like oral-only phosphate lowering treatments and others, they were still left in Medicare Part D, which is the prescription drug benefit. And actually a place that is great for these types of drugs because it allows for more unfettered access for patients. So in 2011, this bundle payment system was created, and it was always CMS's intent at that point to include all drugs eventually within the bundled payment system. Congress, understanding the challenge that would create for patient access, has taken action 3 times to prevent this. First in 2012, which extended this exclusion from Part B through 2016. Then again in 2014, where they acted twice actually to extend the exclusion, first through January 1st, 2024, and then through January 1st, 2025. So that's where we're currently at, and that's what we're fighting against today. As of January 1st, 2025, without congressional action, these phosphate-lowering treatments will move into the bundled payment system under Medicare Part B. So what's the issue with that? I think it's really obvious, but we want to make sure it's well understood because some of these are a little less anticipated or expected, I would say, in terms of the impact. But I think a big one for us, right? Ardelyx has spent a lot of money, truly, on R&D in trying to create this really new and fantastic drug that really changes the treatment paradigm, right? Innovation is exciting. It's exciting because we see these new drugs every day that can create a better treatment option, a better path forward for patients, right? Unfortunately, in chronic kidney disease, it's been devoid of this innovation for so long, and it's really an upsetting thing because we see cancer, diabetes, some of these other chronic illnesses that it seems like there's a new fantastic drug every day. Unfortunately, that's just not the case in end-stage renal disease or chronic kidney disease, and a lot of that is because of the bundled payment system. So anytime you're capping reimbursement, you're disincentivizing innovation, right? Because obviously there needs to be that incentive to research, to develop, to create. So that's obviously a very upsetting impact. And I think one that's probably less understood or appreciated, at least by legislators, that we're really trying to make sure is well understood, is this is a significant burden to smaller dialysis facilities, right? So the large dialysis facilities have suggested they're going to make it work. They would figure it out if this gets moved into Medicare Part B in the bundled payment system. But a lot of these small businesses, these small dialysis clinics, are not set up to actually prescribe and dispense this amount of pills, right? We've heard about how many pills some individuals have to take a day for phosphate-lowering treatments. This is a high volume. And this would just increase the regulatory and operational burden that these small dialysis clinics would have to face. And in fact, we've heard that many would have to shutter, which unfortunately would further create this unmet medical need. But last one is certainly the most important, and that's really removing the ability for providers and patients to make decisions relative to the best treatment option, right? We know that it's important to have access, broad access to the entire gambit of these drugs. So it's really important that the decision-making paradigm is left up to the providers and the patients, not to CMS, not to insurers, not to payers, right? That's where it needs to stay. And that's what would change if it got moved into the bundle. So where are we at right now? We do have 2 bills, a bill in the House and a bill in the Senate. So HR 5074 was introduced last year. We have, that number is wildly inaccurate at this point. We actually have 43 co-sponsors, I believe. I'm looking at Mishu here. Does that sound right? Yeah. We have 43 co-sponsors in the House, which is obviously great momentum there. And then in the Senate, we just actually picked up 3 new Senate co-sponsors this week. So we're doing extremely well. I think this bill, the Kidney Patients Act, would delay this move into the bundled payment system until 2027. It is not our intent to delay it. We are hoping to, at some point, prevent it altogether. But as you can imagine, at times working with Congress, it's a little more nuanced than that. And so sometimes we have to find a way to make sure that it's palatable from that perspective as well. So if passed, yep, it would delay that. We actually have received fantastic and favorable affirmative votes in both the House Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce committees. So these are the committees that have jurisdiction over these types of issues. And in fact, in Ways and Means, it was a 41-to-1 vote, which is fantastic. Really important to our effort here and maybe a little nuanced or convoluted, so feel free to ask questions when we have our panel in a minute. But these bills are budget neutral, meaning that they do not cost the government any more to prevent those drugs from going into the bundle. So this is really, really important and kind of a paramount argument for us, because CMS, as they're trying to create more and more bundled payment programs, is doing so in an effort to save costs, right? It's always about cost saving, and we understand and appreciate that, but the Congressional Budget Office said it costs nothing to leave it in Medicare Part D. So it kind of takes the wind out of the sails from that perspective. I think at this point, you know, we saw the election. We know that politics and the political dynamic in Washington is tenuous, is challenging. But that being said, we still have a lot of reason to be optimistic about the path forward here. We believe at some point an end-of-year health care package will materialize in Congress, and that would likely be our vehicle. So what happens with bills like this is typically you would look for a package, a broader set of bills to include yours in, just to make sure that, one, maybe it goes a little more unnoticed. In the case of ours, we don't necessarily need to do that because it's relatively non-controversial. But also, that's typically how they would do it. So Congress and, you know, the political dynamics at play, they're always trying to find things that pay for other programs, right? And so they piece these packages together with that in mind. So that's what we're aiming for right now. So in December, you can trust us, we will be in DC the entire time trying to make sure we end up in one of those end-of-year healthcare packages. I think the important part here, and really why we're here today, is our advocacy efforts are broad, right? So we are not just working with other pharmaceutical companies. We're not just working with patient advocates in the kidney disease space. We are looking for anyone and everyone who has some interest in this to really participate in this, to show CMS and to show members of Congress that this is such a far-reaching issue, that this has such a profound impact on the community, that how could they ever say no to what we're trying to do. And so we've been really fortunate over the past few years to really have this broad-based coalition that's working together all towards this common goal. And certainly the HEAL Collaborative has provided such a staple in this as we've moved forward. So what can you do? So thank you again for being here today. I think that's the first step, right? Understanding the issue that we're facing. You know, we have a lot of different options and a lot of different ways to get involved. You know, certainly talking to your members of Congress is huge, telling them to support this legislation. HEAL has put together a great petition for us, so you can use the QR code here, sign the petition. That'll go to members of Congress. But honestly, a lot of different ways to get involved, and I think, frankly, our next panel will probably allow us to highlight more of those ways to get involved. But so that's kind of where we're at right now. We are working hard. You know, we have this giant coalition that's working, you know, on this issue that, frankly, needs to be addressed for the sake of patients and patient access. So happy to answer questions now. I don't know, Stan, should we wait until the panel?
Wait until the panel,
Okay.
yes. All right.
Sounds good, but thank you so much. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ken. Okay. We're going to assemble our panel right quick and do that. Ken, if you would join us over here. Why don't you ask him from the panel? You want to ask him right now? Huh? Okay, all right, let's see. Come on.
Because we're going to talk about this in a minute. So you used a couple of things here. One is the term bundle. Why does that mean something? And this is for our online viewers.
Yep.
Whichever, I don't know where, somewhere on one of these cameras.
Yeah.
And then secondly, is there such a thing in Congress that's called the Health Committee?
Great question. Very good question. So talking about the bundled payment system first and what that actually means. So in healthcare, there's a lot of different ways that healthcare services are reimbursed. At times, services are reimbursed through something that's known as fee-for-service, right? So basically, the reimbursement just flows to the provider, to whomever, for that service specifically. So that's what happens in Medicare Part D. These phosphate-lowering treatments are currently covered under a fee-for-service program. And again, because it flows like that, because it's a reimbursement that's targeted specifically at that therapy, more providers are going to provide access to these drugs, right? More LDOs, more MDOs, all of the dialysis organizations are going to provide access to these drugs across the spectrum. What a bundled payment system is it's a capitated model, meaning that a dialysis clinic would get a per patient, per incident rate. So basically, what is it, about $225-ish? I forget exactly what the, so basically that means that as a patient goes to a dialysis facility, the federal government, in this case Medicare, CMS would pay $225 to the dialysis facility to cover all the services associated with that treatment, all of it. And so if they include something else within this bundled payment system, what you're doing is you're stretching these already tax dollars, right? So these dollars, and they won't increase it by much, I can promise you that. So they always say we will increase it by the amount that's appropriate to continue to promote access. Unfortunately, that is never the case. And so you would see a couple dollar increase potentially, maybe not even, to include a whole new class of drugs within this bundled payment system, a whole new service. So as you can imagine, what happens is the dialysis facilities, understandably, are going to try and find the least expensive treatment option to provide to the patients. Obviously not a good system, obviously for drugs that may be better for the patient, they just won't have access, and that's because of this reimbursement methodology. So there are times and places where bundled payment systems work great. In this case, that's just not one of them. And so, health committee. Is there a health committee in Congress? There is not a health committee in Congress. It's a great question because as a state legislator, there are quite a few health committees throughout the country. In Congress, the committees of jurisdiction on health issues in the House are typically Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce. In the Senate, it typically is Senate Finance. There is a committee called HELP, which is Health, Energy, Labor, and Pensions, which does address some of the issues associated with healthcare, but anything that's an entitlement program is covered through these committees that have jurisdiction over tax issues. So that would be Senate Finance. So there is no health committee in Congress, but I love the question because there are a lot throughout the country in those state houses. So yeah, great question. All right.
All right, Ms. Mosby, will you join us there? Ms. Sears, will you join us up front? Ms. Sears is a real change agent here in Arizona, originally from New Orleans. She moved to Grand Canyon State in 1995 to continue her education and find a more affordable place to raise her daughter. After graduating from Arizona State University, she dedicated herself to public policy work. She's currently serving as Director of Faith-Based Outreach and Community Partnerships at Arizona State University. She also is the President of the NAACP East Valley Chapter. You also joined, give her a hand this morning too. Thank you for coming. And then I have my former colleague. He's also, we call him the boss at Hill, but he's a former legislator in the Georgia General Assembly. And he also took my place as chair of the delegation and served on the health committee as well. And he's done an awesome job in our community after politics and kind of got me involved some kind of way. I'm not sure why I'm here today, but it's because of Mr. Mosby as well, trying to work in the community. And of course, you just met Ken Sprague, Director of Government Affairs for Ardella. So let's jump right in. We'll start with you, Ms. Sears, since you're the lady on the group here. You're president of the NAACP. We just had an election. How do we advocate now for our policymakers on a state level and a federal level to make sure that they're paying attention to what we want to do? Even though here in Arizona, you've already approved Medicaid expanded here in Arizona, how do you and your organization get the community involved, the churches and the schools, as president of the NAACP, to make sure that our advocates, who are the people that we need to move, and especially our legislators, how do we get them to move?
I always say, good morning, everybody. I always say that local politics matter. So when you look at health disparities and health equity, as we saw with Vice President Harris's campaign, there was a lot of talk about health disparity with women when it comes to mortality rate. And here in Arizona, we face a huge issue in terms of mortality. So as I think about kidney disease and the renal failure and all that disproportionately that affects Black and African Americans, I think one of the paramount things is to actually, you talked about advocacy and advocating for yourself, but actually having health committees. Very much like this church has a health committee, so does the NAACP. So it's a rattling around these things and actually having these type of forms that go out, making sure that we stream them, but also as legislation comes, make sure we have the relationships with our legislators. I believe that the relationships are key. And unlike any other state, Arizona is a state that's very accessible when it comes to our legislators. Like we can call them, we can reach out to them, and you don't have to be a respected person because we're such a young state. So I would recommend having those relationships and being part of those health committees.
Okay. Mr. Moses, we have 180 members in our House and 56 senators in the state of Georgia. How do I get your attention as a legislator if I want to, I have members in my family that have kidney disease, chronic kidney disease. I need to meet with you. I need to get with you. And I'm just an average citizen, but my family is suffering right now because we don't know what to do with our loved one who has chronic kidney disease. And I need to reach Mr. Mosley today or this week and tell him what we need to get from the state of Georgia. How do I reach my legislator?
Great question. Again, Howard Mosby with Hill Collaborative here, and then served in the Georgia legislature. First of all, as a constituent, your voice is extremely important in the process. I can tell you this right now, as a former elected official, because if I were sitting as a current elected official, I would not use these terms, but I will say this now, that the most important thing to an elected official is getting re-elected. Now, so I say that. So when constituents call, if I know that you live in my particular district and you're calling on me, I'm going to answer that call. Now, if I don't know where you live, I don't know if you're a voter, that's a little bit more of a heavier lift. So it's great as an advocate, advocating that you are very deliberate in this process. One of the things that I've noticed as we've gone around the country doing programs, and it worked this way in Georgia, people go vote, and then they break. You know, I voted, I'm out. And that is, voting is the first thing you do. It's not the only thing, it's the first thing you do. Then you go to the state capitol, you go to the county commission or the city council or wherever, and then you start the process of advocating for what it is that you want.
Okay, so you tell me, Mr. Mosley, then if you're at the Capitol and there's a bill that affects me for chronic kidney disease, I need to come to the Capitol. Is that what you're telling me?
I am telling you need to go to wherever the policy is being made. You need to make sure that your voice is heard there. Now, one of the great things about Arizona citizens have the ability to override what the legislature has actually put in place. Now, you don't see that in other states.
No.
You see it in other states.
I didn't know that
but
either.
here, the people can actually override the legislative decisions that they made during the legislative session. Okay. So that should make people even more responsive to their elected official.
Okay. I'm going to ask this question to Ken, and then I'm going to let you two answer as well. We talk a little bit about in the community and also as legislators working across the aisle. You know, how do we work with different parties, with different beliefs, with different ideas? How do we do that and be effective right now?
So it's a great question. I think a really important question too, right? Because it's so easy at times to just assume that your issue is only going to be more interesting to one party or another, right? Or one party has traditionally supported this issue or this policy platform and the other won't. And I think what we've realized over time is you need to work with both parties, irrespective of the fact that a lot of times, especially in Congress right now, we're seeing such a divisive rhetoric. I think irrespective of that, we have to understand that at times there is still common ground, and we need that common ground. We need to work in that common space. And the best way to do that, honestly, is to think strategically, think about having a well-crafted, well understood argument that can appeal to both sides of the aisle, right? So, for example, when it comes to our issue relative to the Kidney Patients Act, we're thinking about a lot of different things, a lot of different arguments. I think, first and foremost, the big one that we talked about is certainly the impact on patient access, right? That is something that seems to transcend political discourse, right? I think both parties really do understand and appreciate that impact. But something like talking about the impact on small business, right? That could be something that's really interesting to some of the Republican members of Congress. So it's really making sure that you have a well-crafted, well-rounded argument that can appeal to people from both sides of the spectrum, understanding that we do need to make it to that common ground.
Okay, excellent.
Can I
Sure,
say
go ahead,
something
pick
on
it back on that, yeah.
So in Arizona and in other legislatures, 90% of the legislation that's going through is generally uncontested. It goes through 100-0 or whatever the majority number is.
Right.
You have a very small percentage of bills that are very much contested, where you see a lot of the consternation on TV and the back and forth between parties. But for the most part, the two parties work well together, and it behooves us,
Right,
to talk to everybody.
right.
So,
Excellent. Ms. Seals, I have a question for you. You're director also of faith-based with Arizona State and also president of the NAACP. How do the average citizen impact policy? Just the average Joe citizen, whether it's healthcare, transportation, or public. How do I, impart that information to them?
So I would like to piggyback on what you were just saying.
Okay.
Is no matter who the policymaker, as you made the point of being in their district, what I tell all that I serve as the East Valley NAACP, know who it is that's elected to serve you. Whether you voted for them or not, they serve you.
Right.
And we have a very interesting climate here in Arizona. So when you think about this, you have to push beyond race, you have to push beyond religion and creed and all of that, because we're very much in an interesting situation where if you just think about those who are Black or African American, we have one female who's a Democrat that's in the legislature, and we have two Black males who are Republicans. So if that's where you're going to start and that's all you're going to do, you won't have a lot of power. Here we have something called Request to Speak, where you can actually go down and register to be able to submit comments. And your legislators absolutely do look at your request to speak. You go down and you register once, and then from the comfort of your home, you can send in your comments. And they absolutely open those because those are from their constituents. Because every legislator, the first thing they ask is, where does this person live? Is this one of my constituents? And then they delve in from there. But secondly, as a social justice organization and working with the churches, one of the biggest things that we can do is teach our people to be courageous with actually connecting. Because our legislators sit in our churches, they go to our community events, they come and they parlay for our vote. And for so often, I hear people say, well, the only time we see them is when they want our vote. But I actually flipped that on their head. I said, why aren't you making the effort to go see them? Because it's duly your responsibility. When we get in our heads, in our mind, that they served us, rather than the opposite way, I feel like we can more readily go and approach, make an appointment, call, send letters, send emails, ask for an appointment. And you would be so pleasantly surprised how many legislators, and I want to include our mayor and our city council, who are willing to meet with you and hear what you're saying and what's the issue, and actually give resources around that. Because all they have to do is say, I have a team, and team, get on it. So now it's on their desk, but it's now the staff and all of those who are responsible for it. So I believe as the body of Christ, we're so kind of laid back when it comes to those who serve us, and leaning into health equity and health justice, because we know the disparities exist. So we have to start being more vocal and organize it around. If it's two people in a room at an NAACP meeting. It's 2 people who are meeting with the Urban League and doing some other things that helps our community. That's what we do. Like, we literally have nonprofit organizations that is coalesced just around a health equity issue. So we just have to be more courageous and realize first we have to know them, then we have to recognize them and approach them.
That's right.
Because they're people who serve you. They probably live in your neighborhood if you're in certain districts.
That's right. That's good. With the president election, we don't know if our present healthcare system will be disrupted, will be rebuilt, or what have you. But I want the 3 of you to talk to me before I open up to the floor. How do we build coalitions right now, depending on what's going to happen? I don't know if we're going to dismantle our healthcare system, if we're going to have a CMS, or we're going to have a National Institute of Health, or we're going to have a CDC. I don't know. But if we have to rebuild or dismantle based on what we just see right now, how do we build coalitions at the federal level, at the state level, and at the community level? And then we'll open up from the floor.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and truly there is a lot of ambiguity right now, right? We have no idea what's going to happen. I think it's incumbent on us to make sure we're still out there. We're still out in front of it, right? Still making sure our voices are heard. And I think, you know, something that you said just a moment ago is really important and really salient to this question, and that is finding other like-minded groups, right? Finding other groups that you can work with and coalesce around a similar issue, right? There is power in numbers always, right? And so being able to have that coalition that you can develop and work with, and making sure that you amplify your message is critically important, especially given the ambiguity that we're now seeing. Right. So.
And I would just add to that, the resiliency of America. And I think that we can really rely on the fact that America has been around for 200 something plus years, getting ready to come up on 300, and we can reasonably rely on the fact that the systems that are in place will continue to be in place and continue to do the work that you've been out here doing in the way that you've been doing it, but also paying attention to how things are changing. But I guarantee you, that was Friday.
Right.
Sunday's coming.
Right. So, as Ms. Sears answered, so is coalition building going to be important as we transition?
Vitally important. As I look at Arizona, we were on a high thinking about when you look at the politics of our state and us being a swing state, which way that we will go. And we experienced a huge red wave. And what that means to me is it's exactly that time that we start pulling on all who we elected, because they have a duty and a responsibility to serve us. So coalition building looks like looking at those who serve us and where you can find common ground, where you can find, like for instance, in my area, there is a legislator that I don't find much common ground with, but one of the things is she's an advocate for domestic violence. Most of all the other policies, we don't align. So look for those things, because especially with, you know, in the Black community, you're talking about 1 in 9 with kidney disease. We know that kidney disease, and as you talked about the number nationally, has affected a lot of people. So appealing to the humaneness of people and appealing to their humanity and actually leaving ego aside, you know, because politics is a game and it's a chess mate, but at the same time, just that face-to-face, one-on-one interaction with those who serve you can go a very long way. Literally, if it's at the grocery store, if it's down at the Capitol, if it's at your kid's school meeting, it's getting the opportunity to meet face to face. We may not always agree on something, but what can we do in this area? And I promise you, if you take the time, there's a way. And there's so many organizations that are civic engagement beyond voting that actually are working for health disparity, healthcare, all of those different things. So go to those communities and be their foot soldiers, because they may be in a vacuum and only have 3 or 4 people, and they need more hands on deck to
Hands on
actually
deck.
amplify the voice and get the legislators to hear. Because it's great to do the one-on-one, but when there's 10 of you and 20 of you and 30 of you, it makes a profound impact, and you can actually change the heart and the mind of a person. But if you think all the time it's about going to persuade them, no, find somebody you have something in common with, and then build that coalition, and then approach crossing the aisle.
Excellent. Anybody want to comment on that? I just reached a stage where my dietitian told me that I needed a particular binder, and also I need to make sure that this type of food is that I need to sustain myself, because I have chronic kidney disease. But the payers that she has, United Health, Blue Cross, and Aetna, is not in network, Ken and Howard. So that sounds like medical redlining. So what do I do with my legislators and my congressperson and just locally as a city government or county government or with the state government? I'm not in network. I can't get this particular drug that reduces the number of pills I'm taking a day. We don't know what the health challenges are going to be going forward, but I'm out of network. What am I doing? Who am I contacting?
So I'll let Ken answer the question around patient assistance opportunities there. But the short answer is the fact that this is the reason why you advocate. This is the reason why you have to spend time at your state capitals and at your federal government, so that you make sure that they understand that these issues that you're facing, that 'cause a lot of times as policymakers, we make decisions and then we go about our business. We go to lunch, we go down to the Arizona Cardinals game. Not in Atlanta, we go to the Atlanta Falcons. It's a different bird. We'll be here though in a minute.
Right.
But and so we move on, but until the people come and show up and say, hey, that thing that you did has this effect on me, that then it lights up saying, I didn't know. Now, sometimes that's a lie. Sometimes they do know, because people come in and tell you, hey, if you do this, this is what the effect is going to be. But in most cases, a lot of times the legislators don't know that this thing has this kind of negative effect, because there are interests out there that are lobbying just for what they want to have happen. And sometimes you can't be an expert on everything. As a policymaker, I know that we would see 1,000 bills and resolutions come through in any particular year.
That's right.
And for me to be an expert on all 1,000 things that came through I had to be a savant. So you rely on people to tell you that, yeah, this is good for people, vote yes on this. And you do as much research as you can on it, but because you're not an expert. I didn't know anything about logging down in South Georgia. And how to move logs from this plant down the river down to, well, the thing getting the river, it messes up the ecosystem. Well, I'm a country boy from Atlanta. I don't know anything about the ecosystem of rivers in South Georgia. So I have to rely on people to tell me that this is going to be great. It's probably the same thing in terms of how legislation is moved. So you have to make sure your voice is being heard, number one there. Number two, because you asked a very intricate question here. So there are things called pharmacy benefit managers that are out here that are, I'm not even elected anymore. That out here ripping people off.
All right.
That supposedly these organizations were set aside to actually provide this type of assistance to individuals, and they actually are not. And they are shielding pieces of insurance companies from being able to cover these medications. So you also, again, let your policymaker know that you're having problems accessing drugs. You can talk about it.
Okay, I'll let Ken answer.
You want to say something?
Yeah, I want to say something before I can. Pretty simple, and this is prescriptive just to Arizona. One of the things is the constituent services of our local Congress persons are very good. Like whether it's been COVID, disability, all of the different medications happening, because like having the $35 for the diabetes, as you know, a lot of our Congress people went across the country saying this is the cap and the limitations. So why not go to that same energy? You've heard them do the stump speech about doing this great and wonderful healthcare thing for you. So you call their office. You said, I'm constituent ABC, I live at X, Y, and Z, and here's what it is. I need this life-saving drug. Without this, my mortality is in peril. They will respond and actually get the team on it. It seems too simple, but it is just that simple. I know I've called, I've had people on my NAACP team, we've gotten together in a room and all of us made phone calls when it comes to certain things. So literally, as much as even rental assistance and what's going on with the VA and all of those things, we call our congressman. Because our congressman has constituent services. The legislature, a lot of times, hand is tied, and a lot of these policies that we're talking about are at the federal level. Right. So it's so important that we reach out to those who serve us, and that whenever they're making these public appearances, go. You know, it may take a little time to, you know, go and see them and, you know, okay, they're just gonna shake hands and kiss babies, but go, right. Talk to them. Get their card, get the card to their office, because it's not about talking to them, it's actually about their team, right. And their team doing the work on behalf of constituents.
Okay.
No, I think that's a great question. Thank you for that, and thank you. Honestly, those are right on, like those answers. And I think, you know, so this is a very practical question, and I like that. I would say at times, you know, it's frankly hard to legislate around these more operational, practical issues, mm-hmm. right? And so you'll find legislators that are less inclined to actually put forward some sort of policy initiative or legislation that would ultimately directly tell an insurer or a PBM what they need to be doing, right? But at the same time, we know that educating your legislators about these issues and about the fact that they are existing is still really important, because ultimately these legislators at times, and I've seen this happen a million times in a million different ways, they are not above shaming companies. They are not above telling companies that these practices are predatory. We will further investigate this, right? We will do something to make sure that this does not continue to happen. Right. So that's, you know, certainly from a policymaker perspective, it's always imperative that they know what is going on. I think from a practical perspective, you know, something like that issue specifically, I would turn to, you know, some of the disease groups that certainly cover those disease states. So chronic, you know, the NKF for kidney disease, right? Some of these other groups, they have navigators there that can really help you try and figure out that process. But I would also even say a company like Ardelyx, we have a benevolent patient assistance program, right? So we have committed to making sure that patients can receive access to these drugs if they don't have a way to have them paid for. So a lot of companies are very similar in that regard, but I think practically speaking, you're always going to have a lot of luck in talking to some of the nonprofit groups that work with these specific disease states. And also, it never hurts to talk to the company that's actually creating these drugs. True. I think we are creating them to make sure that they can actually get the patients, right? And so I can't speak for all companies, but I would say Ardelyx and a lot of others are committed to making sure that happens, whatever form or fashion that may take. So.
Excellent. I have a question from the audience. No, I got just one. Any question? Yeah. No? Yes, Raymond. Okay.
All right, Raymond Scott. I actually wrote a letter to Kirsten Sinema 2 years ago, and I just got an answer from her, a generic answer, a couple weeks ago. Is it feasible for me to think that getting in touch with not a representative, but a senator about the way they voted, is it feasible for me to think that I would actually receive a response after this experience alone? I guess the thing I'm looking at, and it keeps coming to my mind, was Ruben Gallego used to have coffee with Ruben downtown, especially when he had an important vote coming up, because he wanted to know what his constituents thought about that. Is it feasible to think that he would have the same now that he is not a representative? He is a senator of a state. And to have that openness and so much going on as he represents the state as a whole instead of a district.
Okay, go ahead.
It's personal, and it's the person, right? So you have to, that's why I was talking about going where the energy is, right? So if you see somebody stumping and going out and speaking about health and health disparities and all of these different things, that's the way you want to go. Where if you have a Senate person who you don't really see, you can't really access, really not in community, and it's very hard to even see during election time, then you know that the access may be limited. So it speaks to who the person is. Like for as Ruben, I would say, you've talked references to coffees, he's done the barbershops, he's done those community things, all of those different things, and he's bringing on like-minded team members. Same thing with Greg Stanton, right? They both are in an area in which, and now you have Yasmin Nassari, freshman congresswoman, right? First young Iranian congresswoman. It is important to don't discount them because of the past wrongs and ills of someone else. Go where the energy is. Look at what their TikTok's saying. Look at what their priorities are.
That's right.
What are they trying to work on? What are their constituent base asking them to work on? If you see nowhere in their line is health not a thing, go to the next legislators that health is a thing. But still, it doesn't hurt you or harm you to still reach out and then follow up, because the team is now on their plate. And you have to think in politics, people move around a lot. So when it comes to staffers and all of that, they too want to secure their reputation. So one of the things I do is make sure I know who the staffers are, because they're more than likely will be working on the issue that I'm concerned about, rather than the actual congressman.
That's right. Excellent. Another question?
No. I won't
Did you have a question?
mess with that.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, no problem. Excellent job.
My question is, we get access to like the internet or whatever, but what kind of programs or advocacy they have out there to reach those people who are homeless, who don't have access to a computer, let alone a phone, so they can get information to get drugs, to get the kidney care that they need? We have a hard way to go, and we have access to those. But what kind of programs or what kind of outreach are Phoenix doing to grab those people? Because everybody's not mentally unstable. Some of them just don't know where to go.
And that's true. And this is where your nonprofit organizations come in who work in these spaces are extremely important. One of the challenges, though, as someone who is leading a nonprofit here, is ensuring that you have the right support to be able to go out and do this work. This work is, and it's a lot of work. Putting your hands in the dirt to till the soil, to move the needle in these spaces requires support from the community. It requires support from organizations. Our delegates have done a good job in providing that on the drug side. But to your point about information getting back to the community, specifically when you start thinking about things like broadband access, when you're thinking about access to health care and to basic life resources, that that these nonprofit organizations are filling a gap where government is actually dropping the ball. And these safety net organizations are providing this support. One of the problems that I see, though, from where I sit, is that a lot of these organizations are working out here in silos, and that we haven't figured out a way that we collaboratively work together to fill out some of these gaps. And so some groups are getting a lot of attention, and then there are some folk out there that are getting very little to no attention. And we as nonprofits need to do a better job at that.
Excellent. Okay. All right. All right. I think that was the last question. If we would, before we leave today, and it's been an interesting talking to the panel. Thank you so very much for being open enough to answer those questions. I'd like to have just a brief synopsis or a call to action, so to speak, of what we can leave here today with from a policy and from a community coalition building perspective. And what would you tell our audience online and that's present here today?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. You know, I would say a couple of the things that we touched on during this, but it's, I mean, don't be afraid to get involved, right? I think that's the biggest message that I could give to everyone. It's not scary. It may seem scary, but it's not scary. So get involved, and whatever that, you know, whatever that may look like to you. But I think from the perspective of chronic kidney disease and from the perspective of this issue that we're talking about today, I mean, look at the, you know, sign the HEAL petition, right? Talk to all of us. See what you can do in terms of talking to your local legislators and talking to your members of Congress. I think, you know, we've kind of nailed it home, but your voice matters. Constituent voices matter, right? The community's voice matters. So make sure that you're out there and you're talking to those legislators and they understand these issues. So I would say that would be my message to you.
Thank you, Ken, and I would echo that and also know who represents you. I'm gonna steal your point. know who represents you, and that is probably the first thing that you need to do. From the federal level all the way down to the school board, you need to know who these individuals are because they actually are the ones that are making the determination of how resources are being distributed around to ensure that you get access to either healthcare, education, whatever the thing is. And I think that it behooves you to make sure that you know who represents you.
I agree. And I would definitely say, use Google. Who represents me, Phoenix, Arizona? Put in, and then it'll lead you to your Secretary of State or your recorder's office. In other states, same different things. And most likely, you'll be directed to your Secretary of State. And then you will get the laundry list of those who represent you. And then take some time. See what they're working on. Click on them and talk to people who you love, who you care about, your children, your daughters, about what's actually going on with those who represent us. I can't drive home enough the people we elect, whether you voted for them or not, but the elected person represents you. And back to the homeless outreach and what happens with homeless individuals, I think it's very important that we as a community in the nonprofit space just follow up with case management and coordinated services. Because there are a lot of nonprofits who are diligently working on the work. But when you have people move from place to place, it gets very complicated because there are things in there to make sure that meds and all of that, but if the system lose track of people, it's harder. And that's where cities actually come in. Right. And one of the most paramount conversations I had with my fire department was a lot of the calls that they have and they service is for homeless individuals. And a lot of times that takes up so much of the services that there's a delay in fires and in house burnings and all of that because there's so many resources used. So we have a lot of our fire departments who put together groups that are willing to work on this issue with homelessness because it impacts the ability for them to do their everyday jobs.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Panel, you've been awesome. Before we leave today, there's a survey inside our brochure. If you take a little bit of time and fill it out for me and give those to me before you leave, that will certainly help me to make sure that HEAL does a better job in our next one. On behalf of HEAL Collaborative Atlanta, our delegates, we'd like to thank Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church and the Phoenix community for hosting us today. We hope that something that we have said has moved you, and as the scripture in Hebrews said, we hope that you become doers of the words, not just hearers only, and that we continue to move out into the community. With that, I think I'm standing between lunch, so Ms. Sibley, you want to come up and say hello and do the... give thanks. Give them a hand again. Thank you so much for being here.
All right, I just want to thank everyone for coming out. Pilgrim is honored and delighted to host something of this magnitude. It's important and necessary information and work. We want to thank Heal Collaborative. They were very persistent, and hopefully this is not the end of our relationship. We want to thank Ardelyx and what you came with. It was just impactful and powerful, and all of the individuals, the networking that I was able to be a part of, Dr. Victor Waters, I have now a relationship, and just the information on this level and how we get things done has been very impactful. So I just want to thank, and I got to meet Miss Martina, who's going to be doing a lot of work with Pilgrim. So for the dietitian, because as I said before, I'm into preventive health care and, early detection so that we can, prevent us from having to get to this part of the continuum. And with that, I just want to bless the food and just kind of just mingle and network if we can. Father God, we just want to thank you for such a time as this. Dear Heavenly Father, we first want to thank you for gathering us all here together and this endeavor to get the knowledge that we need and to be the constituents that we need to be. God, we thank you for being so kind and so gracious. God, we want to take this work, God. We want to do the work. We want to be where we need to be. God, you know the plan. Only you know the plan. But God, we want to just look to you from which cometh our help. We bless this food that has been prepared for us, that it go toward the nourishment of our bodies, and that we will be better us's. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank y'all so much. We have lunch over here to be served, okay? Thank you so much for being here.